I thought I knew my family. I spent my whole life believing that they would be there for me, just like I was always there for them. But when the will was read, everything changed. They threw me out like an old coat, and I was left standing there with nothing. Not a thing. But a piece of paper that said, "You're not worthy." And now, as I sit here, in a house that doesn't feel like mine anymore, I'm wondering, how did it come to this? Before I tell you what happened next, would you do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell, and let me know where you're watching from. It really helps us know where these stories are reaching. I'm Eleanor, 72 years old, and I live in a small, quiet town in the Midwest, where everyone knows everyone's business. Or so I thought. I spent my life running a modest bed and breakfast, surrounded by pictures of my late husband, George, and our children, who were supposed to be my legacy. Our home, the place we raised them, now feels like a prison. The echoes of laughter in the walls now only remind me of how much it hurts to have everything ripped away. It was supposed to be George's estate, but they, my children, decided it was theirs. Just like that. I fought, I pleaded, but all they saw was a weak old woman who didn't know how to navigate their world of lies and manipulation. That hearing was the turning point. I sat there, trembling, my hands gripping the papers in front of me, but my heart was sinking. I had worked my whole life for this, every penny, every sacrifice, only to watch it slip through my fingers. When the lawyer finally spoke, I could hardly breathe. The estate, Eleanor, it's going to the children. It's theirs now. You're not entitled to a thing. And just like that, I was no longer a part of the family. Not in their eyes. I was nothing. After everything I did for them, all the love, the support, I was left with nothing but that cold, hard decision in front of me. And a heavy weight in my chest. Would I walk away? Or fight? I didn't have a choice. I was about to lose my home, my life. But something else. Something bigger was out there, waiting to be uncovered. Something that could change everything. I was standing there, staring at the courthouse steps, my head spinning, the weight of the world pressing down on me. The world I once knew, my family, everything I thought was safe, it was all unraveling. I didn't know where to go, who to turn to. I felt lost, like a ship adrift in a storm. As I started walking away, I caught a glimpse of an old man standing by the corner. His clothes were a bit worn, but his eyes, they were sharp, piercing through the noise of the world like he knew something I didn't. He seemed out of place, and yet, something about him felt familiar. "Are you the heiress to $20? He asked, his voice low but steady, like it carried the weight of a secret. It was one of those questions you hear in passing and forget about, but something about the way he said it made me stop. My heart skipped. The words didn't make sense. Was he talking about the inheritance? Or was he just another scammer looking to take advantage of a vulnerable old woman? I stood there, speechless, staring at him. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" I managed to ask. "You heard me," he said, his gaze unwavering. "The $20. The one you don't know about." His words were cryptic, but I felt a flicker of something. Was it hope? Or dread, in the pit of my stomach? I didn't know what to make of it, but I felt an urge to know more. This stranger, out of nowhere, knew something about my situation. How? Why? My first instinct was to walk away, to dismiss him like the rest of the people who had tried to take advantage of my weakness. But there was something about him. Something that made me stay. "Why would you ask about that?" I asked, my voice shaky, not sure what was happening anymore. "Because I know where it's hidden," he said simply, as if it was nothing. "And I think you should know, too." The air around us felt suddenly thick with suspense. My mind raced. Hidden fortune? The $20? What in the world was he talking about? It couldn't have been real. But then again, why would he say something like that if there wasn't truth to it? I looked at him, still unsure if I was dealing with a con artist or someone who actually had information that could change my life. The curiosity gnawed at me. Was he a lunatic, or was he offering me a lifeline I hadn't seen before? And what did he mean by $20? What was it that had been kept from me, hidden in the shadows all this time? "I'm not interested in games," I said, turning to walk away, but he didn't move. He just stood there, watching me, like he knew I'd be back. The way he looked at me, like he was waiting for me to come to my senses, sent a chill down my spine. He wasn't done. Neither was I. I didn't go back to the courthouse that day. I went home, but I couldn't shake the thought of that stranger, his words echoing in my head. The $20. What did it mean? I spent the night pacing through the house, the silence of it all gnawing at me. George had been gone for over a year now, but it felt like just yesterday that we were sitting at this very kitchen table, laughing over coffee. I looked at the photographs on the wall, pictures of our children, of moments I thought were forever. I could hear their voices in my head, telling me how much they loved me. But now, it felt like the betrayal was worse than any of the pain I'd experienced before. I went to bed that night, but sleep didn't come easy. I lay there in the dark, haunted by the thought that something wasn't right. My mind kept going back to the will, to how everything had been taken from me. I'd tried to trust my children, to trust their word. But now, with every passing day, the truth became clearer. They had planned this. They had been lying to me from the start, pulling strings behind my back. And I had been too blind to see it. The next morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed the papers from the hearing, the ones that showed how little I was entitled to, how little they had left for me. The will was clear, but I knew there had to be more to the story. I knew George better than anyone. He wouldn't have left me with nothing. I began to search through old documents, through letters I'd kept in drawers, things I hadn't touched in years. The letters from relatives, from friends. They all seemed meaningless now, until one letter caught my eye. It was addressed to George, but the stamp was from a town I didn't recognize. There was something about it that felt wrong. The name on the return address, Barrett and Sons, rang no bells. I opened it, and my hands shook as I read the first line. Dear Mr. Green, we are writing to inform you that the estate left to you by your late uncle has now been finalized. The sum of $20 is being transferred to your account as per his wishes. $20. The same amount that stranger had mentioned. I couldn't believe it. What was this? Who was this uncle? And why hadn't George ever told me about him? The questions swirled in my mind. I had to know more. I couldn't let this lie go any further. This was the key, I was sure of it. And if my family knew about this, if they had been hiding it from me all along, well, I would make sure they paid for it. I left the house that morning with no clear idea of what I was doing, only that I had to get to the bottom of it. The feeling in my gut told me that this wasn't just about money. This was about something far deeper. Something dark. I went to the town library, where records were kept for years. I searched for any mention of Barrett and Sons, and it wasn't long before I found something, a file marked, Will of Henry Barrett, 1955. This was it. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on me as I opened the file. But as I scanned the pages, my heart sank. The will, which had seemed so simple, was now the answer to so many questions. It wasn't just $20. There were references to properties, to land that, if my family knew about, could change everything. The deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't just a family secret. It was a conspiracy. They had been hiding this from me all along. And I had no idea just how far they'd gone to erase my place in the family, but they had made one mistake. They had underestimated me. The more I read, the more everything started to make sense. George's uncle, Henry Barrett, had left behind a significant estate, more than just the $20 mentioned in that letter. There were multiple properties, some valuable, some not. But it was the land that caught my attention. The letter from Barrett and Sons referred to a parcel of land, a piece of real estate that, from the looks of it, was worth far more than anything my family had ever let on. I spent the entire afternoon at the library, poring over old records, cross-referencing names, addresses, and dates. My head hurt from the effort, but I couldn't stop. I had to know everything. Henry Barrett had been a recluse, leaving behind no heirs, which is probably why my family thought they could claim the inheritance as their own. They had to have known about it. That $20, the one they'd written off as insignificant, was a tiny fraction of what Henry had really left behind. The real inheritance, the real fortune, was the land. And that was what my children, my so-called family, had been hiding from me. They thought they could keep me in the dark, that I wouldn't figure it out. But they didn't count on me. I'd lived a life of hard work, of sacrifice, and of standing up for what was right. And if it meant exposing their lies and taking what was mine, I was ready. That night, I made a call to an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Frank had been a lawyer in this town for decades, and I knew he had the connections to get the information I needed. When he picked up the phone, I wasted no time. "Frank," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I need you to look into something for me. A piece of land. And I need you to do it quietly, no questions asked." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Eleanor, what's going on? What is this about?" I couldn't answer him right away. How could I explain the mess I was tangled in? My family, my children, how could I say out loud that they were trying to steal from me? "I'll explain everything later," I said, my voice sharp. "Just find out everything you can about Barrett and Sons and the property they mentioned in the will. I'll see what I can do. But Eleanor, be careful. This sounds like it's getting bigger than you think." I hung up the phone and sat in the dark for a long time. My mind raced. What had I gotten myself into? But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. This wasn't just about money. It was about standing up for myself. It was about justice. They'd taken everything from me. But I was going to take it back. The next day, I visited the property. Frank had told me to be careful, but how could I stay away? I needed to see it for myself. When I arrived, I found an overgrown field at the edge of town, tucked away behind a rusted gate. The land was beautiful, untouched, full of promise, and just waiting to be claimed. But something didn't sit right. As I walked through the tall grass, I noticed something strange. A small shed, barely standing, hidden behind a row of trees. It was so out of place, and yet, there it was. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It wasn't much, but it was a sign. Something was hidden here. Something my family didn't want me to find out. I walked closer to the shed, my heart racing. And as I opened the door, I found exactly what I had been searching for, a box, covered in dust, with my name on it. I stood there, staring at the box in my hands. It felt like the world had stopped moving around me. My fingers trembled as I carefully opened it, half expecting to find something trivial, perhaps a letter, a trinket, a memento. But inside, there was something far more important. A collection of documents, legal papers, deeds, and contracts, each one pointing to the land my family had been hiding from me. This was the proof. Proof that my children had known about the estate, about the hidden fortune, and that they had actively worked to keep me out of it. The weight of it was almost too much to bear. I closed the box, my mind racing. The truth was clear now, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to bring this to court. I had to confront my children, my own flesh and blood, and make them face the consequences of their actions. But the fear was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. How could I fight them? They had lawyers, money, power. What did I have? A box full of papers and a fading sense of justice. I decided I wouldn't back down. For too long, I had let others decide my fate. This was mine to claim. I wasn't going to let my family destroy me, not after everything I had done for them. The day of the hearing came faster than I expected. I stood outside the courtroom, my heart pounding in my chest. My children were already inside, their smug faces barely visible through the glass windows. They had no idea what was coming. As I walked in, the room went silent. I took my seat, my hands still shaking as I placed the box of documents on the table in front of me. I didn't need to say a word. The papers spoke for themselves. The lawyer for my children, a slick man I'd never met, stood up first. "Your Honor," he said, turning to the judge with a rehearsed smile, "we believe that this case is settled. The will has been executed, and the estate has already been divided among the heirs. We respectfully request that the case be dismissed." I could feel the tension in the room, the weight of my children's betrayal pressing down on me. But I didn't flinch. I knew this was my moment. "Your Honor," I said. My voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I'd like to submit evidence that shows the will was manipulated and that my children have been hiding the real inheritance from me." The room fell silent. The lawyer raised an eyebrow, and my children exchanged nervous glances. I opened the box, one paper at a time, and laid the documents out in front of the judge. Deeds, contracts, and a letter from Barrett and Sons confirming the land as part of the estate. The judge looked over the papers, his expression unreadable. I could see my children's faces changing, their arrogance starting to crack. They hadn't expected me to fight back. They hadn't expected me to have the strength to stand up to them. But I did. The judge leaned forward, his eyes scanning the documents, then turned to my children. "This will require further investigation," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It seems there are some discrepancies in the will, and we need to ensure everything is above board." I sat back in my chair, a sense of quiet triumph washing over me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had regained control. The fight wasn't just about the land. It was about showing my family that they couldn't push me around anymore. As the session ended, I gathered my papers, my heart still pounding. My children were silent as I walked past them. But I could feel their eyes on me, cold, calculating. They knew they'd underestimated me. And now, they were going to pay the price. The following weeks were a blur of legal motions, heated conversations with Frank, and countless hours spent poring over the documents. But despite the mounting pressure, there was something undeniably satisfying about watching my children squirm. The truth was coming to light, and with each passing day, the pieces of their betrayal fell into place. The quiet whispers behind my back, the way they'd dismissed my concerns about George's will, it all made sense now. They had been lying to me from the start. Not just about the land, but about everything. They thought I was too old, too weak, to fight them. But now, I was fighting for my dignity. I was fighting for what was rightfully mine. I sat at the kitchen table, Frank's phone number on the screen in front of me. I hadn't spoken to him in a few days. He'd been digging into Barrett and Sons, trying to get a clearer picture of what they knew about my family's involvement in hiding the estate. My hands trembled as I dialed the number, my nerves getting the best of me. The truth had to be out there. There had to be something more. And I wasn't going to stop until I had it. "Hello?" Frank answered, his voice low and tired. "Frank," I said, my voice shaking with anticipation, "what did you find? Did you uncover anything about my family's involvement?" There was a pause on the other end, and I felt my heart race. "Eleanor, you won't believe this," Frank said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "The documents you've got, they're just the tip of the iceberg. It seems Barrett and Sons weren't just handling your uncle's estate. They were also involved in orchestrating a transfer of property that your children were aware of long before George passed. They even made some changes to the will without your knowledge." My breath caught in my throat. "What do you mean, changes? What kind of changes?" "Your children, they had access to the will before it was finalized. They made sure that the real inheritance, the land, would go to them. They knew exactly what they were doing, Eleanor. This wasn't an accident. This was planned." The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. My children had been conspiring with Barrett and Sons the whole time. They had known about the land, about the fortune that had been hidden from me. And they'd done everything in their power to make sure I didn't get a single cent. They hadn't just stolen from me, they had stolen from George's memory. From all of us. I was silent for a long time, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me. How could they? How could they do this to their own mother? The anger bubbled up inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let them win. Not now. "I need to know everything," I said, my voice steady, a resolve settling deep within me. "Every detail. I'll take this to court. And when I do, I'm going to make sure they pay for everything they've done." Frank hesitated. "Are you sure about this? You're going up against a lot of power, Eleanor. They've got connections, money. This is going to get ugly." "I'm already in this deep, Frank. I've got nothing left to lose. I'll see this through, no matter what." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. The pieces of the puzzle were all coming together. My children had betrayed me, and they were going to pay. I didn't care how long it took, or how hard the road ahead would be. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about exposing the truth, about making sure my family faced the consequences of their actions. And I was going to make them face it, whether they liked it or not. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing, replaying the conversations, the revelations, the betrayal. Every word Frank had told me echoed in my ears like a drumbeat, louder and louder. My family had crossed a line, and now it was time for me to do the same. They had taken everything from me, my home, my peace of mind, my dignity. But what they didn't understand was that I had something they didn't. I had the truth. And that truth would be my weapon. The next morning, I sat down at my kitchen table with the box of documents in front of me. Frank had given me the final pieces I needed. The plan was set. I was going to bring them all down. But there was one question I kept asking myself: how far was I willing to go? Was I prepared for the cost of justice? I had no choice. I wasn't going to let them win. But as I sat there, looking at the evidence in front of me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to cost me more than just a fight in the courtroom. There would be no going back after this. My family would be shattered, the lies exposed. It wasn't just the land or the money anymore. It was everything they had taken from me, the years of trust, of love, of believing that we were a family. That was the price of justice. I made the call to my lawyer, and within a few days, we were in court again. This time, things were different. I had the proof, the documentation, everything I needed to show that my children had conspired to hide the inheritance from me. I was ready to face them. When I walked into the courtroom, my children were already there, sitting in the front row. They looked different, less confident, more nervous. They could feel it too. The game was up. They knew the truth was coming, and it was coming for them. Your Honor, my lawyer began, his voice calm but firm. We have uncovered evidence that suggests the will was tampered with. The defendants, he gestured to my children, had prior knowledge of the inheritance. And they deliberately worked to conceal the truth from the plaintiff, Eleanor Green. I watched as my children shifted in their seats, their faces pale. They hadn't expected me to come prepared. They hadn't expected me to fight back this hard. Your Honor, I said, standing up, my voice strong, steady. I don't want their money. I don't want the land. I want the truth to come out. I want them to face the consequences of what they've done. This isn't just about me. It's about what they've stolen from all of us, the trust, the family, the love. It's all gone. And they need to understand that actions have consequences. The courtroom was silent. I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air, and I knew I had them. My children couldn't escape this. Not anymore. The judge looked at me, then at my children, and then back at me. I think we've heard enough, he said, his voice calm but authoritative. We will take this matter under advisement, and you will receive a verdict in due time. As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange sense of relief. The hardest part was over. The truth was out. But the battle wasn't finished yet. My children had been exposed, and the punishment they would face, both legally and morally, was something they would have to live with for the rest of their lives, but for me, it was enough. Justice wasn't always swift, and it wasn't always easy. But it was always right. And that was the only thing that mattered now. The days that followed the hearing felt like an eternity. The world moved around me, but I stood still, caught in the storm of my thoughts. The trial wasn't over yet, but I could feel it building towards something. I had no idea what the final outcome would be. Would the judge rule in my favor? Would my children face the consequences of their betrayal, or would they slip away, untouched by the truth? Every phone call, every visit to the courthouse, every moment I spent waiting, it all added to the mounting tension. I found myself questioning everything, wondering if my pursuit of justice was worth the cost. It was like a tightrope walk. One wrong step, and everything I'd worked for could come crashing down. I spent hours going through the evidence again, just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. There were more documents, more details I hadn't noticed the first time. But there was one letter in particular that kept drawing my attention. It was a note from George, written in his familiar handwriting. I hadn't seen it before, and it was dated just months before his death. My dear Eleanor, it began, I've made a decision about the estate. I want you to know that you are my everything. The land will go to you, but you must keep it safe, protect it. The others will try to take it from you. Don't let them. You deserve more than they can ever understand. The words hit me like a freight train. I felt a lump in my throat, and for the first time in ages, I allowed myself to cry. The betrayal, the lies, the loss, I had tried to hold it all together, but now it all came rushing back. George had known. He had known what they were capable of, and yet, he had trusted me to fight for what was right. I wiped my tears away, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just fighting for the land or for the money. I was fighting for George's memory, for everything he had worked for. And I was going to make sure my children paid for what they had done. The tipping point came when I received a call from Frank. His voice was grim when he spoke. "Eleanor, we've got a problem," he said. "There's something else you need to know. Barrett and Sons, they weren't just involved in the will. They've been covering up something else for years. Something your children didn't want anyone to find out." My stomach churned. "What is it? What are you talking about?" "Your children, they've been hiding assets, other pieces of the estate, from the very beginning. And it's all tied to the land. They've been forging documents, making false claims about ownership. Eleanor, they've been stealing from you for years. Not just this inheritance, but others before it." The words hit me like a thunderclap. It wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about everything they had done, everything they had stolen, piece by piece, over the years. The truth was darker than I had ever imagined. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We expose them," Frank replied, his tone hard. "This ends now, Eleanor. They can't hide anymore." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about taking down everything they had built on lies. I was going to make them face the consequences of their actions, no matter what it took. I was ready. The tipping point had arrived, the courtroom was packed that day. Word had spread, and the stakes had never been higher. I walked in, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no turning back now. My children sat there, as smug as ever, confident that they would win. But what they didn't know was that I had the final piece of the puzzle. The moment Frank had handed me the new evidence, the forged documents, the hidden assets, I knew everything was about to change. The judge called the court to order, and I could feel the air shift. My lawyer stood up, ready to present our case, but I felt a surge of determination rise up within me. It wasn't just about the land or the money anymore. This was about the truth, about justice. And I wasn't going to stop until I had it. "Your Honor," my lawyer began, his voice steady, "we have uncovered irrefutable evidence that the defendants have engaged in fraudulent activities, including forging documents and concealing assets from the estate. They manipulated the will, hid critical information, and deliberately tried to cut out the rightful heir, Eleanor Green." I watched as my children's faces began to change. Their confidence wavered. They could feel the walls closing in around them. But it was too late for them to escape. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no way they could deny it now. "Your Honor," I said, standing up, my voice strong and clear, "I want to make one thing perfectly clear. This isn't about vengeance. This is about what's right. For too long, I've trusted my family, loved them, believed in them. But I stand here today because they have stolen from me. They've stolen from George's memory, from everything we built together. And they need to be held accountable for their actions." The judge looked at me, his gaze steady. "I believe we've seen enough," he said, turning to my children. "The evidence is overwhelming. You have betrayed not only your mother, but the very foundation of family. This court finds you guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and theft." I watched as my children's faces drained of color. The weight of the verdict hit them hard. They had thought they could get away with it, thought they could push me aside and take everything they wanted. But in the end, the truth had caught up with them. And justice had been served. The judge turned to me, his expression softening. "Eleanor Green, I commend your courage. Not many would have the strength to face what you faced. This is your victory, and it's a hard one won." I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was mixed with something else. Satisfaction. The knowledge that I had done what was right. That, despite everything they had tried to take from me, I had fought back. And I had won. As I left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. My children would face the consequences of their actions, but more importantly, I had reclaimed my dignity. I had proven that no one, no matter how powerful, no matter how manipulative, could take away my right to justice. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. My family was fractured, but the truth had set me free. And that, in the end, was worth more than anything they could ever steal from me. The weeks that followed were quiet. The legal battles were over, and the estate had been properly divided. My children faced consequences for their actions, legal, moral, and personal. But that wasn't the end of it for me. For a long time, I had thought that the fight would end with a victory, with justice finally served. And in many ways, it did. But the real victory, the one I didn't see coming, was the peace I had found in myself. As I sat in my favorite chair by the window, sipping my coffee, I thought about how much had changed. The house no longer felt like a prison. The silence was no longer a reminder of the battles I'd fought, but a peaceful space where I could breathe. My family might never be the same, but I had learned something valuable through all of this, that family isn't just about blood. It's about trust, respect, and doing what's right. And even when that trust is broken, we have the power to rebuild ourselves. I thought about George, and how he would have been proud of me for standing up for what was right. For fighting not just for the land, but for the dignity and love that should have been shared among us all. He had trusted me to keep that promise, to protect our family's legacy. And even though everything had been shattered, I had kept my word. I looked at the photo of my children on the wall, the one from when they were little, so full of hope and love. The truth was, no matter what had happened, I still loved them. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something I could simply forget. But in the end, I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that holding on to anger, holding on to hurt, only holds us back. The lesson wasn't just about standing up for myself, though. It was about finding the strength to forgive, not because they deserved it, but because I did. Letting go of the past, of the betrayal, allowed me to move forward with the grace I hadn't thought I could find, and as I sat there, reflecting on everything that had transpired, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would always be scars, always reminders of the battles I had fought. But I had survived them. And I had won, not just in the courtroom, but in the deepest part of my heart. I looked out the window at the fields beyond. The land was still there. My land. And it was mine, in a way that meant more than any inheritance could ever measure. Because the true inheritance, the one I'd fought for, was the wisdom I had gained. It was the strength to move forward. No matter what, and with that, I made my peace. So, if you're listening to this, and you've ever felt betrayed, ever felt that the people you love have turned their back on you, remember this: the fight for what's right, for your truth, is worth every tear, every struggle. And in the end, it will be your strength that sees you through. Don't let anyone take that from you. Take care of yourself. Take care of your heart. And always remember, the truth has a way of coming out, even when we think it's buried.